Welcome in, Canucks fans, to episode 151 of the Canucks Speakeasy podcast. My name is Doug.
All right, this isn't rum or whiskey or whatever. It's just sadly just water. I'm Brendon, aka Jabo. Actually, no, that's water, so that would be vodka, I guess. Yeah, whiskey and yeah. So yeah, that's not vodka. Yeah,
Could be
that's what
Everclear.
I was going for. That's true. It's true. But to know I'm going healthy tonight. Unfortunately, I can't go crazy on a Wednesday night, which is too bad. But it is what it is.
Nice. And we've got 3 games to quickly run through, Brendan. So let's jump into the game flight.
Well, I got lucky. I went to the game on Friday night. It was as dominant a first period as I've seen that team play in a long, long, long time. I mean, I was sitting in Demko's end. Demko barely saw the puck, and the only bad part of that first period, they only got out of it They only got out of it up 1-0 because it should have been a lot worse. And so everybody in the stands was worried. But Canucks pull away in the second, and then really we're quite lucky to be able to roll a lot of their third and fourth lines, second and third pairing defensemen, and coast to, well, no, it wasn't coasting because Demko had to make some nice saves in the third period, but got a nice 5-0 win, and Demko with a well-deserved shutout.
The Canucks then hosted the New York Rangers, and a bit of a controversial loss in overtime as PD was clearly tripped without a penalty call in overtime, which led to an odd man rush the other way, which resulted in the game-winning goal for Keandre Miller. Filip Hronek again looked great. He had 2 assists in that game, and your goal scorers were JT Miller, Tyler Myers, short-handed, believe it or not, and another defenseman potted a goal, Carson Soucy.
Probably the worst game the Canucks have played since the Philadelphia game against Nashville. They win it 5-2, but it really scrambly, lots of turnovers. And I know Rick Tocchet wasn't happy with the way they played after the game. Pettersson was probably one of the most pedestrian hat tricks, according to his coach, you'll ever see, because he didn't really want to talk about the hat trick as much as he did. He wanted to talk about everything else, which is probably a good thing. Don't be happy with the way you play. But they won 5-2. Pettersson with a hat trick, Lafferty with a goal, and I can't remember who had the other one. Miller, after being benched, of course, had the other one. But that's the sign of a good team. You don't play your best, and you find a way to win.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. You don't apologize for wins. Obviously, if it's an ugly win, like I agree with you. I didn't think the Canucks looked overly good for all 60 minutes of the game last night, but a win's a win. You get the 2 points. They still have yet to give up a point to a Western Conference team, which is great. And yeah, man, I think it's nice. The fan base seems very excited, of this good start. There's a lot to like about the Canucks right now. And how are you, Jabo? There's no Pete this week. It's just you and I. Pete is trudging through the desert, so to speak. I think he's going from Arizona to New Mexico, and maybe he'll see a UFO. I don't know.
Did he have shrooms with him by chance?
Hey, I don't know. But hey, I mean, that might help with you trying to see a UFO, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. You're going to see something. I guarantee you that. Hey, you know what? I got to go to a hockey game with my dad, which, my dad's 75 years old now. So, not that he's going anywhere, but you never know. Right. He's at that age. So it was just a great night to spend with him. And I mean, he's been a Canuck fan since the very beginning. Seen way more bad than good. And it was nice to sit down because he was as pumped at the end of that game as anyone was, and as excited to see them play well. And I mean, this start's been great. For this group, 6-2-1. We want. I mean, fans and the team wanted a good start, and we've gotten it. So. That night was a good night for me, and one that I'll remember for a while.
Well, I saw you tweet the photo of you and your dad at the game, and honestly, like I have to say, like your dad does not look over the age of like 55.
I got good genetics.
Who you said he's 75, man. Like I'll say, like he looks very good for his age. He does.
I got good
20 years younger.
Both my parents look ridiculous for their age. They should not be. Nice. I mean, if you looked at them, you're like, oh, really? So in that respect, I feel quite lucky because, that could be a lot worse.
Yeah, we've got an action-packed episode for you guys. We're gonna jump into just our thoughts after the first month of hockey for the Vancouver Canucks. And, we're going to have our 3-star segment. Pete has written in who his 3 stars for the month of October are for the Canucks. But first, you can follow us online. You can follow Pete, who is, like I said, not with us this episode, on Twitter
Sure, he's
at
not.
Pete
He's not
underscore
dead.
gas.
He's not
Yes,
dead.
that's
He's not with us because he's on vacation. He's with us.
that's true.
He's
That's
just
true.
not.
Yes, yes.
He's just not on the show.
Yes, that I guess the context of the way I said that could be misstrued. So yes, you're right. That's a good catch. But yeah, you can follow him at Pete underscore gas. You can follow me at Doug Venn. And then we've got the podcast at Canuck Speak. And then Brendon.
At Jabo, Jabo underscore Vancouver. Of course, also on YouTube. So go there, hit that subscribe button. It's right there. So you have no excuse not to hit it if you're watching this right now. Hit that button.
Yeah, and the notification bell as well, right? I mean, that's something that I always hear these content creators say. I don't know, but yeah, hit the little bell too, I
Hey, if
guess.
there's a button here, fucking hit it.
But yeah, I think we want to kind of start this episode on a bit of a sad note. One a little bit personal to Canucks Twitter, and then another one kind of more of a tragic thing that happened in the hockey world in general. But yeah, a very prominent figure in Canucks Twitter lore, Patrick Petrin, I believe is how you'd pronounce his name. Unfortunately, he passed away the other day. His brother tweeted it out to Canuck fans. I believe it was last night or yesterday in the late afternoon, which is really sad. I know he was in the hospital. Again, I don't think any of us know what his medical issues were. But he was a very passionate fan, and you saw a lot of people paying tribute to Patrick and people who would get into pretty heated arguments about Swedish players and their impact on the Canucks and the NHL. But, a lot of the people that did have arguments with him said he was always very respectful, never resulted to name calling. And, it's another sad, person in the Canuck Twitter sphere that has left us far too soon.
It was really 55 years old, and he was tweeting from his hospital bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was, I mean, which shows his passion and his commitment. No doubt about that. And yeah, when I saw the post last night from his brother, I just felt awful. It's just like, wow. I mean, yeah, like you said, no one knows what his medical conditions were, what the issues were, but I mean, at no point did I think that this was life threatening, or at least he never gave the indication, and nor did he have to, that it was life threatening. I had my rows with him, as did a lot of people, but I mean, he always came back for more, and never seemed to take it personally, which is a lesson for a lot of people who you get into to discussions with, and they take it more personally than they should, because this is just sports, guys. This is sports opinions, and no one's is more valid than anybody else's. I mean, we're all going to be wrong from time to time, and it shouldn't be taken personally. And he never seemed to take it personally. So yeah, it's just really sad, and you just feel bad for his family and his friends and the people who knew him the best and loved him the most. You feel bad for them because he was only 55 years old, just very, very young.
Yeah. And, I think just the passion, and I think that's one thing that Canucks Twitter gets a lot of a bad rap, and I get it. But I think just the passion that this fan base has, for this team. And even though 99% of the time we don't all agree with each other, that passion is still there. And Patrick definitely was a very, very passionate Canuck fan. And, I think a lot of us are going to miss interacting with him online.
Yeah, Dick's like, I mean, and again, I mean, he taught people a lesson. Like, I mean, you're not going to agree with everybody. I mean, you come at your, I mean, we all come at our opinions passionately, and we all like to think we're right, but you have to accept that you're going to be wrong, and do it respectfully. I mean, my whole mantra is don't don't let a Twitter argument get to the point where you wouldn't go grab a beer with that person after.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, I mean, I think he did a very good job of that, because he had some very strong opinions, and we didn't always agree with them, but again, he always came back for more, and it clearly he didn't let it bother him.
Yeah, I agree. Well said, and I don't think I could have summed it up better myself. In more tragic news, there is the accident that happened over in the UK. Former Pittsburgh Penguin, teammate of Teddy Bluger and Sam Lafferty, two current Canucks, was tragically killed on the ice. An accident where a skate from an opposing player hit him in the neck. I mean, we've seen this before with Richard Zednick and Clint Malarchuk. Unfortunately, this incident resulted in him losing his life. We're not going to get into some of the social discourse that's been on Twitter that I'm sure most of us find repugnant. What's going on with what people are saying about Petrograve, I think, is the unfortunate person whose skate is hit Adam Johnson, but I do think, and we saw this today. I don't know if you saw this, Brendan, but the WHL is already implementing net guards as of, I think it's November 6th. Net guards are going to be mandatory in the WHL. And again, very tragic, thoughts and prayers go out to Adam Johnson's family. And, it's just a tragic thing that happens. But I do think this is going to open up a much bigger topic on player safety moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the discourse and the discussion that came from what happened was just. I mean, if you want to see the worst of Twitter, you go and find, you know, people in the back and forth, and I mean, I posted something, and I mean, I saw some pretty bad shit being posted, and because I think at the end of the day, people need somebody to blame, for something like that, and at the end of the day, no one knows what the intention was, except for the man who did it. And I mean, I just, in a sport where it moves so fast, I mean, I don't know, I just find it hard to believe that anybody would intend to have their skate up that high. Like, no, it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I like what the WHL is doing. Like, I mean, I look at it in other sports, and like, for instance, Dale Earnhardt Sr. dying in NASCAR in 1999, and almost instantaneously they put in place the HON system, the head and neck restraints, and that a lot of the old time guys like Dale Earnhardt Sr. didn't want to wear, but that would have saved his life. And this is certainly I mean, as much as it is an isolated incident where it hasn't happened a lot. I mean, it like, in any way we can to make the sport safer, we have to do it. And whether that means grandfathering it in, at other levels, and letting people make that decision at that time. But if you're entering the league, you only have one decision, like I believe they ended up doing with helmets. At the end of the day, that may be where they have to go, because it's just all about making the sport safer, because you've got 200 to 250 pound guys wearing razor blades on their feet, and we've seen people get cuts in different places, and it's awful. It is isolated, but it doesn't matter if it's isolated. If you got to do what you have to do to make the sport safer.
Yeah, I mean, they did the same thing with visors as well. Like you mentioned helmets,
Yeah.
but visors are now grandfathered in. I mean, I think Kevin Bieksa has got to be one of the last players that I can think of that was skating, or maybe Patrick Maroon's another one currently in the NHL who isn't wearing a visor at the moment, but it's grandfathered in. And it was interesting. Gary Bettman was actually on the Pat McAfee show. I don't know if you ever watched the Pat McAfee show.
I do watch that show, but I don't watch full episodes, but I watch clips. It's an amusing show, and I mean, Pat McAfee's made himself a brand. So
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, good for him, you know.
No, but it's great because his platform is so big, and obviously he's more of a football guy, but he's really been,
He's a huge
pumping
hockey fan. I think
hockey. Exactly.
he's a big Blackhawks fan, I think.
No, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Penguins. Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But he had Gary Bettman on his show today. And they were talking about a lot of things. And it was just amazing watching Bettman react to a guy like Pat McAfee, because obviously, Bettman's used to, things being kind of structured and like, okay, this is, the question you ask or whatever. But they brought up about player safety and, the tragedy that happened over in the UK with Adam Johnson. And, Bettman brought up a good point. He said, look, a lot of these things are already there for players to use, but the PA chooses for them not to use it. They are not the PA, the Players Association, isn't keen to make these drastic changes to their equipment, but there are Kevlar shin pads to protect against, your skates accidentally stomping on your leg. There's Kevlar pads for your wrists and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff is there, and players, for whatever reason, just don't want to use it because they're not used to using it or whatever. And, I do think we're going to see the change. And, Bettman did acknowledge that, they are going to have discussions moving forward with the PA. And I'm sure there are a lot of players that this is maybe a bit of a wake up call. I mean, TJ Oshie apparently is a guy who's got a little side hustle business where he sells Kevlar shin guards and wrist and neck protectors, and yet he never wears them. And so he said, even for himself, yeah, I've really got to kind of take a long look at the mirror at what I'm doing. And, I've got a family, and, I need to protect myself out there. So I do wonder if in the next 5 years, we will see neck guards mandatory across the league.
Well, it's probably Bieksa didn't wear a visor, but Bieksa did wear Kevlar leggings, I believe, because I
Yeah.
think he had a skate cut to the back of his leg that was quite serious. So, um, you know, it is like those sorts of incidents are isolated. But again, when you've got 10 guys on the ice, 12 with goalies on the ice at any given time, and they're all wearing razor blades, I mean, you know, stuff can happen. And so,
Well,
it,
they're
you
also
know,
skating 30 to 40 miles an hour on
exactly
that ice
right.
at times, right?
Exactly
Like, so
right.
there's speed as well involved. It's a crash course on that ice at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I like the idea of bringing it into the lower levels. I mean, I would like to think that the WHL is just the first, and what I hope will be at least a few more of the junior leagues implementing that, because if you can get players used to it at that age, it makes it easier for them to use it when they get older.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. But yeah, let's move on to the local team here. I mean, we are a Canucks podcast after all. We're essentially 1 month into the season. Now, I know technically the season started, I think game one was October 9th, and we're recording on November 1st, but I'm calling it a month into the season. You mentioned it earlier, Brendon. The Canucks are 6-2-1. Um, what are your thoughts of this team after the first 9 games of the season?
I mean, you have to be happy, 6-2-1. I don't think anybody, even the most, positive person would have expected that, given that they, you know, you played one game at home, but you start with back to backs against Edmonton, and a quote unquote Stanley Cup favorite. Now, I mean, you could argue that maybe they're not looking at like it at the moment, but you get through that, and then you get through a 5-game road trip, and then you come home for 3 games, and against I mean, you got the Rangers, who are some would say a Stanley Cup contender, and two teams that are sort of in that bubble for possibly a wild card spot in St. Louis and Nashville, and you're 6-2-1. I structurally, after that game in Philadelphia, they slowly chipped away at the way they wanted to play. I thought they looked very good in Nashville. I thought they looked fantastic against St. Louis. And then played really, really hard in a back-to-back with their backup goalie in net against the New York Rangers. And really, you know, if Kuzmenko finishes one of those chances, if the refs do what they're supposed to do, which is their job, which is call a penalty, which I think most people like. I mean, I don't get like. It doesn't matter who you're a fan of, I mean, you could be not a fan of the Canucks, and you watch that play, like, oh yeah, well, that's a trip. So that's not a homer thing to say that. That's just a fact. It was a penalty. We know it was a penalty. And then, I mean, the game in Vancouver against Nashville, which is probably the worst game that they played in the last little while. But I'll say that about that game is just disjointed as they looked. I mean, I just felt they looked slow. It was one of those games that, like, even when the Canucks were really good, Tuesday games are always difficult. It just seemed like those midweek games where it's just there's a malaise in the crowd, and just the team just those games, for whatever reason, in Vancouver have always been hard to get up for. There were times, even in and around the 2011 season, where they just did not look like just really sharp, like they were ready to play. And so that's kind of what we got. But I will say this, structurally, I thought they were okay. I thought they were disjointed at points. I thought they were out of position at points. I thought they turned over the puck, cheaply at points. But it never got overly chaotic. Like, they never looked like they were totally out of sorts, which is what we would have seen in the past, which is what I was happy about. Now, obviously, you want to fix everything else. And to me, my hope is when they go to play San Jose, a team that hasn't won yet, you can use that game as a launching point. Like, if they go and they beat Nashville 7-0, I mean, it's a lot easier to look past that San Jose game. But the fact that they didn't look very good, and that the coach came out after the game and called them out, even called out, Pettersson, who had a hat trick, for all his mistakes. And to be fair, Pettersson wasn't great for a guy that scored a hat trick. And even he admitted as much. So, my hope is tomorrow night in San Jose, you get a team that, really, really learned a lesson and is ready to come out and play a much better game. Almost like I compared it last night to Belichick. Belichick always loved games where, they would win, but there was something within that game that he didn't like, that didn't look good, because it meant the next day he could go and absolutely shit on them in practice, to just say, hey, you look at what you did here. You really, I mean, it kept them motivated. So, that's my hope, is that they come out in San Jose really motivated to play a much better 60-minute game.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the only game you wouldn't criticize how ugly of a win it would be if you won the Stanley Cup or you're winning the Super Bowl. It's like, hey, we won. It doesn't matter how ugly it was, we won. But I think the biggest thing for me this year is just, I know there was a lot of people, and myself included, that had a little bit of, I don't know if concern is the right word, but just it was a
Trepidation,
looking.
probably the right word.
Yes, with Rick Tocchet, right? Just the fact that, he was associated with Pittsburgh, as well as Rutherford and Alvin, and, just the Pittsburgh connection was just becoming a little bit too much. And to Rick Tocchet's credit, though, I honestly, I think he's been a breath of fresh air in this market. Even media guys in this market, who are usually pretty critical of the team, the coach, the players, have actually been singing Rick Tocchet's praise. And, the fact that he has been critical of the team, even after a big win like last night against Nashville, where they win 5-2, they win by 3 goals. I know I get it. One was an empty netter, but still they win by 3 goals on home ice on Halloween night. And Tocchet is like, yeah, no, there were some issues. Obviously, we can talk about the man behind you getting benched for the final 4 minutes of the second period. Pettersson, like you said, scored a hat trick, and the coach still was pretty critical of him. In my opinion, I thought the 3 best players of the game last night, Hughes, who had 3 assists. Again, this guy looks like a world beater at the moment. In my opinion, him and Miro Heiskanen are kind of 1-2 for the Norris Trophy. I know it's still early in the season. Demko actually made some pretty big saves last night to keep the game, to keep Nashville at 2 goals. And the other guy who I honestly I know we're talking Hughes, I know we're talking Pettersson, JT Miller, Demko, but honestly, the guy that I think is making, I don't know if the biggest impact on the team, but I'll say the most important impact on the team for me in the first 9 games has been Filip Hronek. I think Hronek, I know the first game, it was an 8-1 drumming of the Oilers, and even the second game, we got the win, but we were badly outplayed against the Oilers. But Hronek has progressively gotten better and better and better every game. And this pairing between him and Hughes, and I know last night was the first game where it was funny because both goals against, they were on the ice for 5-on-5, but it was the first time 5-on-5 any team has scored against Hronek and Hughes, the Hronek and Hughes pairing on the ice. But to me, he's been a difference maker out there. Just his calm and coolness and his defensive instincts, right? He's not the most flashy guy, but you can just tell the way he can read a play in the defensive zone. And, he's always in the right place at the right time. And for me, he's been one of him and the coach have been my 2 biggest X factors onto why this team has had such a good start within the first 9 games.
I'll say Hughes last night. Hughes last. Obviously had 3 assists. So I'm not going to complain. His first period, that was probably for me the worst period he's played all year. That first period.
Yeah.
His turnover directly led to the first goal. It was a pass that you not used to seeing him make. But that's what makes him such a good defenseman, is that he can make a play like that. But he's got that elite talent to make up for it very quickly. And so despite that, and I'm fairly certain Talkett's going to harp on him about, hey, you can't make that mistake where he did. And another guy for me from that game that I liked, he obviously he's not doing it on the score sheet as of yet, and I hope he will. But to me, whose defensive instincts are really, really fantastic is P.S. Suter. There were a couple of plays in that game where if he's not in the right place and not reading that play well, it probably ends up, if not a goal, a glorious scoring chance in front of the net. So he has that ability to sniff out chances, to know where the opposition is going to go with that puck, and he seems to be in the right spots more often than not. Now, if he could start finding that offensive touch, that all the better, and maybe he will over time. But from a defensive standpoint, I have liked what I've seen. You get a guy like Bluger. That's kind of the sort of the forgotten element of this start, is that they're doing it, and they haven't had everyone in the lineup as of yet. Teddy Bluger's yet to play a game. I don't believe Teddy Bluger's even skated since the season started yet. So
yeah, has there been an update at all on his injury? And do we even know what the injury is? I don't even remember them saying what it was.
I think he has a broken foot, I believe. Because I remember in that last preseason game, he did take a shot off the foot.
Yes, you're right.
And so that might be what it was, but I don't think they've confirmed it, or at least not that I've heard. Maybe they haven't. I just missed it. The PK I thought was much better. To be fair, I didn't think the PK was that bad against the Rangers. I said it before the game. You can't give that team power plays. That's a team that went into that game with a 30%, success rate on the power play.
Well, especially 2 5-on-3s as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the big thing, because I really didn't think that they were that bad 5-on-4. I thought that they were actually quite good 5-on-4. It's just unfortunate. You have the Hronek over the glass penalty that, we can argue until we're blue in the face whether that should actually be a rule in the league anymore. I understand why it was put in the first place, but I do wonder if there's a reason to have it. If there's a reason to at least, critique that penalty, because that clearly wasn't intending to do that. And the too many men on the ice penalty, which, I didn't like it. I thought it was a cheap penalty for them to call at that time, especially when they're down a man. You don't have to make that call. So, I didn't, outside of that, I really didn't think that they were that bad on the PK. And so that's why I wasn't all that concerned going into the Nashville game that was going to explode into something much, much worse. So, but still, it was still nice to see them go 4 for 4 on the PK. And, they're 77% on the PK so far. And somebody had said that they were bottom dwellers still, and they're not bottom dwellers. They're 16th in the league right now in PK percentage, much better than they were in the past. But they were right around this time of the year. They were basically at 50%. Much better, and probably one of the major reasons why they are 6-2-1, because they've had games where the penalty kill has come up big in critical times. The game in Nashville, for sure, was probably a good example. Florida as well, another good example. You've had games where penalty kills have made the difference in comparison to last year, where it was going the other way around. So last night's game, I hope they use what they did poorly as a catalyst to come out again, like I said, against San Jose, and really play a smart, solid game. Because if they play smart and solid against that San Jose team, they're going to give them chances. So just play well defensively. And they're going to gift wrap you something at some point. And the Canucks have the skill to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, the San Jose game feels like a trap game just because they're winless
we're all
on the
scared
season,
of it, right? We're all
of course. Mackenzie Blackwood's their goalie who stunted on the Canucks when he played for New Jersey. You know what I mean? But I do think the fact that the coach and the players, like Quinn Hughes, to his credit, post game last night was also critical of the team. He says, "Hey, we got the win, but there's definitely things we need to tighten up and be better." You mentioned Petey admitted himself that it wasn't his best game, right? It was, there was definitely some holes for this team to kind of sort out. The one thing I will say that has concerned me a little bit within the first 9 games, and I know the reffing has been very critical, like Canuck fans have been very critical of the reffing after these first 9 games, but the Canucks are taking, in my opinion, too many penalties. Now, are some of them justified? Some of them not justified? Like, I know, JT Miller got a double minor last night. He got the hooking call, which he was kind of getting chicken winged by Forsberg there. So Forsberg helped sell that call. And then he got a unsportsmanlike misconduct, which you very rarely see called. You see players yelling and screaming and, yelling obscenities at the refs, and they never call an unsportsmanlike penalty against the player. So I do wonder what happened last night for the ref to trigger calling the unsportsmanlike penalty, because you never see it. And I also thought it was funny because no one was really defending Miller for getting called an unsportsmanlike online last night, because I thought, like I said, you very rarely see that. But that is the one thing I do worry about, is this team is seemingly taking a lot of penalties, whether rightfully or wrongfully. And the more opportunities you give to the opposing team's power play, the more your penalty kills on the ice, the more susceptible you are to get scored upon. So that is something I would like to see this team tighten up. And I guess Rick Tocchet, that was one of the reasons why he benched Miller last night. He had that double minor, and then he took another bad penalty near the end of the second period, or close to the end of the second period. And then he benched him for the rest of the second period, which I think sent a strong message. It's like, hey, we've seen JT Miller over the past couple of years. I think it's great. He is one of the emotional drivers of this team, right? This team doesn't have a lot of loud vocal guys. We've heard it from Rutherford and Elvine and Tocchet that it's a quiet team. And Miller's one of the few guys that is willing to kind of try to get the guys riled up. But he has gotten a little too emotional at times on the ice, and it's cost this team, whether it's a giveaway, whether it's him slamming his stick on the boards, barking at a teammate, which again, I don't have issues with, but when you could tell that his emotions get the best of him. And I thought it was really great, and I know there's some criticism that he wasn't, made available to the media last night and whatever. But I actually thought, Miller came out, he started the third period, won the faceoff, shortly thereafter drew a penalty on Forsberg, and then scored the go-ahead goal, which ended up being the game-winning goal. Or no, it wasn't the game-winning goal. Pardon me. It was the fourth goal. Yeah, the insurance goal. But, it was great. Miller responded, I thought, very well. And Tocchet post-game said, yeah, they talked it in the intermission. Tocchet apologized to him. Apparently Miller apologized to him, and they moved on. And I love that. I love seeing that.
JT Miller is best when he's playing on the edge.
Yep.
when he's at his best as a hockey player, is when he's straddling that line. And like a lot of players who play that way and are exceptionally good when they're on that edge, at some point they're going to go over the edge. And that's when it's the coach's job to rein him in and remind him, hey, don't stop playing close to that edge. Just know where it is and know when you're crossing it. And I think players need that reminder, and again, it's never to tell the player don't stop playing with that edge. It's just know where it is so you don't cross it. And last night he crossed it. And it's a reminder to him from the coach that against another team on another night, crossing that line could cost your team 2 points. And so I thought it was a great reminder, because it's not going to be the last time it happens. There's going to be another instance in an 82 game season with a guy like JT Miller who plays the way he does, where he's going to go over the top of it, and he's going to have to do it again. Do I have a problem with him not speaking to the media? No. I mean, whatever. I mean, he spoke to the media this morning. I mean, and he's an emotional guy, and just like when anybody, when they in life, it's better to speak when you've cooled off and you've had some time to think about things a bit, which obviously he did overnight. And he came in and he spoke to the media, and that was that. Obviously the media wants him to talk when he's when things are bubbling at the surface, but I think from the standpoint of the team and what they're trying to accomplish, it was smart to not do that, to not have him speak. Let him cool off, let him think about it, and come back the next morning and speak more candidly, which he did. I mean, I look at the game last night, and I was thinking about it today, and what this team's trying to build and what this coaching staff is trying to build with them is a consistency. And you look at that 2011 team, they would lay an egg every once in a while, but because they had built up that sort of consistency over time, you were more willing to give them a pass on certain things. Whereas with this team, they're really in the infancy of this. This is really just the beginning, So, we're in the infancy of the team playing this way. We're only really 9 games in of playing this certain system and this certain style that Tocchet wants. We're really just starting to scratch the surface of what this might be. So they don't get the benefit of the doubt if they play a game like they did in Nashville. They just don't. They have to be more able to be consistent, because let's be honest, there's a lot of teams that go on winning streaks. They get really happy about themselves, and that's when things start to cave in a bit. It happens even with really good teams, and this team can't allow that to happen. And I applaud Rick Tocchet, because he's really trying hard to keep this team focused, keep this team understanding that they really haven't, as good as 6-2-1 is, they're a couple of losses away from this for them really, kind of getting back to an average start. So, really start and continue to push forward and try to really build that consistency. So as they continue to tinker this roster, as players move in and out, you bring in new players and they know where that standard is. Because I really think that was the problem in the past when you brought players in. There was no standard set as to how they wanted to play, as how they should play. So a lot of players came, like Jason Dickinson, for instance, came in here and failed. And I believe to my core it had nothing to do that Jason Dickinson wasn't a good player. I think that the system, the way they were playing, was rotten. And a lot of players would come in there and fail. And a lot of players did come in there and fail. Nate Schmidt, so what they're trying to build is that sort of culture where, as this roster gets altered and changed, you're going to bring in new players with the best possible chance to succeed, which is what they built in between 2006 and 2011. It's what they built. So you brought in guys like Chris Higgins. You brought in guys like Christian Ehrhoff. You brought in, whoever you want to add, like Yannick Hansen, guys from their system, and they were brought in and they were given the best possible chance to succeed. And I think that's what this organization, what this coaching staff is trying to build with this group. And the early returns are good, but it's important to remember that they are just very early returns. And I applaud the coach for continually trying to remind this group that you haven't really accomplished anything yet. The season's long and you're going to go through some tough times, but if you keep that consistency, you're going to be able to get through them much easier than you otherwise would have.
Well, and I think it's just you hold everybody to the same standard, right? Whether you're JT Miller, Niels Hoglander, Tyler Myers. I mean, Tyler Myers had 2 horrific games back to back for the Canucks. He has been bumped down to the third pairing. His minutes have now been sheltered, and he's playing much better because of it. He's playing more.
He was up to 19 minutes last night. So, and I don't know if you heard this, but I heard this today. I had no idea. Apparently, during that terrible stretch of games, he actually texted Rick Tocchet to apologize for the way he was playing. I had no idea.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I heard that today. I was like, wow, okay. I mean, and again, people are hard on Tyler Myers, and and a lot of it rightly so. If he's not playing well, you're going to get criticism. It's just the way it is. But we should never question, how much he clearly cares. I mean, when things go wrong, I mean, it clearly affects him, and he clearly wants to be a better player. And it's nice to see over the last few games, him starting to round back into form, and because if he's going to be here all year, which he might be, they're going to need him because he's a right shot veteran defenseman with some size who can kill penalties, and he's created offensively as well. Has a couple of goals.
Yeah, but the fact that everybody's held to that standard, and you brought up Bill Belichick, and I'm a Patriots fan, and one of the things you hear back about the Belichick Brady era was he was hard on Tom. He would yell at Tom in front of the team, the best player, the greatest quarterback of all time to a lot of people, and he held Tom to such a high standard, and Tom flourished under that, and it brought the best out of Tom, and Tom became this great player. And I think, you're seeing a similar thing with Tocchet at the moment, in the way he's holding all of his players accountable. He doesn't care if you scored a hat trick, or you had the insurance goal, you know what I mean? And you bounce back after taking 2 bad penalties and scored a goal. He's going to, I don't think publicly criticize you like a way John Tortorella does, but he's going to hold you accountable and be like, yeah, obviously it's great PD scored 3 goals, but he had troubles keeping the puck on his stick. He was fighting the puck all night. He was kind of chasing the game instead of, dictating the game and controlling the game, which we normally see PD do. I think that it is a breath of fresh air. Boudreaux, I think, is very much a player's coach, and he just kind of let the players play, which I get, that works some of the time, but very rarely does that type of coaching style get you to the pinnacle of a championship, a Stanley Cup. You need to be able to lay the hammer down on your best players, and you can't be afraid, to tiptoe around them or to, challenge them when they're not at their best. And I think that's what Tocchet's doing. And I think the key, much like the Belichick Brady thing, is the players have to buy into that too. You know what I mean? They have to buy into this. And I think, this core, PD, Hughes, Demko, those are the 3 main guys. Miller, I'll add in there as well, but Miller has had some playoff experience in his career prior to coming to the Canucks. These guys really haven't had actual playoff experience. I know the bubble was technically playoffs, and they won, 2 rounds. They beat Minnesota, they beat St. Louis, who were the, defending Stanley Cup champions at the time. But to actually play a home playoff game in front of this fan base, none of these guys have had that. And that was the other controversial thing. Yeah, I guess controversial thing that came out of last night was, PD said it's fun to play here now. You know what I mean? There was people, what does he mean by that? I just think the fact that they're winning and the crowd is happy and the players are happy to go to the rink. We heard Brock Besser in the offseason, talk about how he lost the love of the game. He didn't enjoy being a hockey player and he kind of reassessed, where he was in his life and he wanted to have that fun again. And, we've seen a massive improvement in Brock Besser this year defensively. He looks much faster, on the ice as well. Like he's still not, the best skater in the world. Either is Petey, but he definitely looks much faster. He's harder on the forecheck. He's winning those board battles. And, these are all signs that this team is heading in the right direction, and I still think a team like Edmonton, there's just too much top end talent for them not to make a push and to, be there for at least a wild card, if not a playoff spot. Calgary, I think Calgary's done. Like, I think even Craig Conroy is willing to
I mean,
pull the
they
shoot
were,
on Calgary.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
losing again.
And,
I mean,
Seattle, looks like an expansion team again, which I don't think too many people are that surprised with. But, I do think this Canuck team has a very, very legitimate shot of being a playoff team this year.
it starts with winning.
Yes.
Because if your coach is going to chew you out and what he's telling you clearly isn't working, that grows thin very quickly. So it starts with that. I mean, I look back. I mean, if you talk to the guys that were, there, in AV's era as coach. I mean, he rode his best players. He rode the Sedins harder than he rode anybody, and he was hard on them. And I think that Sedins understood that. And I think, I mean, there's an understanding made quite clear from the coach to his best players that this is what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold you accountable, because if I'm going to hold everybody else in that locker room accountable and I don't hold you accountable, it's just not going to work. And so if I'm harder on you than I am on anybody else, it's going to make everybody stand up and listen. It's one thing to chew out Dakota Joshua, it's another thing to go and give an honest critique of your best players when their performance isn't quite where it should be. And the rest of the locker room is going to hear that. And we'll see in San Jose what the response is, but certainly I think that's important. Accountability is really important. I mean, I always said that, that Bruce Boudreau was the right coach at the wrong time. There are situations where Bruce Boudreau will work, and usually it's after you have a stern taskmaster of a structure coach in there, which is what happened in both Minnesota and in Anaheim. He took over for coaches that were very, very strict, very, very structure oriented coaches, and you bring him in there to loosen the reins a bit, to give these guys some positive reinforcement, because that structure is there. It's there. It's not going to leave them. So he can then implement his system, knowing that these guys know how to play 200 feet hockey. This team didn't know how to do that, and it can't just be like, the problem with the previous regime is that rather than get a coach in there that was going to teach all of them how to play that way, they threw Band-Aids at it. So you go and you sign Jay Beagle, you sign Antoine Roussel, you sign you sign Jason Dickinson. You bring in players that could play system-oriented hockey, but you bring him into a situation where no one else knows how to do that. And so, that's not going to work. The only way a team can be good structurally and defensively is if all forwards and all defensemen are on the same page. You can't throw players at that and think, oh, voila, it's fixed. So, and that's why I'm quite happy with, because I've had, long discussions and arguments with people who would tell me, oh, this Canuck team isn't capable of playing with structure, that this roster isn't capable of playing well defensively. And I said, that's fucking bullshit. We've seen it. I've seen it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again with teams that were bad defensively that just needed a kick in the ass from the right coach. And
Look at Ken Hitchcock in Dallas.
Ken
And
Hitchcock
ask
in
Brett
Dallas.
Hull. Ask
Exactly
Brett Hull
right.
what he thought of Ken Hitchcock. And, he hated him, but they won that Stanley Cup. And Hull is forever grateful to him for that.
Barry Trotz in New York is probably
Yep.
on Long Island is probably the best example of taking the worst defensive team and making them the best defensive team. And everybody's like, "Oh," the argument I got from some media members was like, "Well, that's Barry Trotz. He's one of the greatest defensive coaches of all time." And I'm like, "Well, no shit." But it does show you that it's possible. You just need the right coach. And this coach came in, Rick Tocchet, with the mandate that we're going to get better defensively. And he's holding these guys to a very strict standard of principles that he expects you to uphold. And if you don't uphold them, whether you're Elias Pettersson or you're Sam Lafferty, you're gonna hear about it. And
Yep.
that's how you build defensive responsibility. That's how you build structure, and that's how you have a team that, outside of a couple of games, is really starting to grasp the concept that if we play better defensively, it's going to lead to better offense. And again, we're in the infancy of it. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow it goes all wrong. But right now, it's at the very least, it's promising for what we might see, not just for the rest of this season, but what I hope for the next few seasons.
Yeah, for me, I think the game this Saturday against the Dallas Stars will be a real litmus test to see where this team really is, because Dallas looks great. They've got a similar lineup in some ways. I mean, the Canucks don't really have old stars like a Sagan or a Ben on their
No,
roster, but there's a
but
similar
it is
lineup.
similar. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
similar
you're right.
in that they don't have a ton of superstars, but they have some really good superstar players and game changers, and a very good goalie,
Yep.
an elite,
Young.
an elite puck moving defenseman, and you know players, that have built in or that have bought into playing, a sound defensive game, which, it's what you to me it's the only way you win in this league. You can't win, like, so few teams can win in this league by playing run and gun. It's just not feasible. You have to learn how to play defensively, not just your bottom six players. Every single player on that roster has to be willing to do the things necessary in their own end, to win hockey games. That's the only way you do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only way you become a Stanley Cup champion, right? Is
Yep.
your best players have to be willing to sacrifice their bodies and, get in front of pucks to block shots. We saw Petey and Miller play PK time last night and in the Ranger game as well. I believe Miller got the shorthanded goal in the Rangers game, I believe, or one of the games he got a shorthanded goal. I thought it was the Rangers game.
He had a shorty in the St. Louis game.
It was the St. Louis game. Okay.
Yeah,
But
Myers had the shorty in the Rangers.
That's right. It was the Myers. Yeah. Totally unexpected.
How could you forget that?
Sorry. No, that was insane. That was insane. But yeah, again, it's been a very solid month, I think, to start the season for the Canucks.
Just 9 games, though. Just 9
I
games.
know. No, you're right.
I
It
know,
is
and
only 9
that's not
games.
just and that's not to remind you. That's to remind everybody, including myself. It's just 9 games. We got
No, you're right.
73
You're
more
right.
to go.
But let's get to our 3 stars for the month of October. So Pete did write in what his 3 stars were. So I'll read his 3 stars off. And then if you want to go after Brendon, and then I can do mine last. So Pete, his 3 stars for the month of October. Number 3 is JT Miller. He's second on the team in scoring. Really helped Brock get going, anchoring a solid second line, Tocchet kind of player. His second star is the new captain, Quinn Hughes. He's been incredible. He's pacing for an 80-point plus season, which I did predict Hughes would be a point a game player at the end of the year and have over 82 points. But hey, it's still early, only 9 games, like you said. But Hughes is his second star for the month of October. And then his first star, all by himself, second in league scoring, Elias Pettersson, 16 points in 9 games, finished the month with a hat trick on Halloween. The guy is a superstar. It's gonna cost this team. The price just keeps going up for that extension for Elias Pettersson. But those repeats 3 stars for the month of October. Who are your 3 stars, Brendan?
Okay, well, same 3 players, different grouping. I'm going number 3, Elias Pettersson. I mean, again, really, there's no quibble with any of these guys. You could throw them in any spot, but obviously second in the league in scoring. So I'm not going to sit here and argue that Pete made him number 1, because there's nothing really to argue with that. My number 2 is JT Miller. I just think he's been their best forward consistently. Pettersson has the points, but that line with DiGiuseppe, Miller, and Besser has just been fantastic. They get the way that Tocchet wants them to play and they have been just consistently good. Miller had his hiccup in the last game against Nashville, and that's all it was, because he ends up scoring, insurance goal to make it 4-2. And I'm not going to sit here and argue that he hasn't been their best forward. He's just been consistent on the forward check and very good. And then number 1, I think, is Quinn Hughes. I think Quinn Hughes has been phenomenal. He's had one bad period, and that was the period against Nashville, but he's just been exceptional. He's been, arguably the best defenseman in the NHL through 9-10 games. And what else do you say? I could sit there and watch that guy skate for hours. It's just a beautiful thing to watch, and something you can't teach. And I do hope fans appreciate what they're seeing, because you're seeing one of the best defensemen to ever. Well, no, I will say it. Probably the best defenseman to ever put on a Canuck uniform.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think he is the best defenseman to ever put on a Canuck uniform. My 3 stars are a little bit different than your guys's. My third star is Filip Hronek. Honestly, the guy's got 8 points in 9 games. He looks really good on the back end, especially paired with Quinn Hughes. I just think he is looking like a real rock solid acquisition by this management group. We really needed a legitimate kind of top 2 right shot defenseman, which we really haven't had since Christian Ehrhoff, I believe, was a right shot defenseman. Sammy Salo, maybe, or no. Yeah, maybe Dan Hamhuis, I guess, but Hamhuis never put up the offensive points, kind of like what Hronek's been putting up recently. My second star is going to be Elias Pettersson. Again, second in league scoring. He's been outstanding. His two-way game has really developed. Like you said, wasn't his best game last night, but ended the month on a hat trick. Huge. And I'm with you, Brendon. The number 1 star for the month of October for me is Quinn Hughes. Hughes, coming into the season, had a lot of pressure on him being named the captain. He's been phenomenal. He has been absolutely phenomenal. Anytime the puck is on his stick, he makes something happen. He is shooting the puck at a far higher rate than he normally does. He already has 3 goals on the year. I think it was Jeff Patterson tweeted this out, that Hughes got his 3rd goal last year. I think it was in January 6th. Hughes got his 3rd goal of the season, and he's got 3 goals within the first month of this season for the Canucks. Quinn Hughes is my first star of the month. All right. I guess it's time for us to head into the free pour segment.
So who's going first? Is it me or you?
I'll go first.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So it's that time for the free pour open floor segment. And I just wanted to talk, and again, it's a little bit sad, but I wanted to talk about the tragic loss of Matthew Perry. I've never been a Friends fan. I was never a big fan of Friends, the television show, but his character on Friends, Chandler, was the only, in my opinion, actually truly funny character on the show. I thought all of the other ones were almost like cartoon caricatures of real people. Chandler was the only person who, to me, was a believable real person and a real character. And you're just hearing a lot of these people talk about Matthew Perry, the person. Hank Azaria shared a really nice story about how he helped him get sober. And, Matthew Perry, suffered, with alcoholism and addiction. And, it was an ongoing battle. And I just wanted to, say how sad it is Canadian as well. How sad it is to see, a Canadian comedic icon like Matthew Perry pass away.
Yeah, I mean, that was shocking. I
Yeah.
mean, given his history, I mean, you're not going to sit here and go, I mean, you didn't think it could happen, and but like when it did happen, it was just like it just seemed like he got his life just on track, and that's a sad thing sometimes. I mean, you just seem like you get it back on track, and it just ends tragically like that, and yeah, I mean, he's an icon. I mean, and
Yeah.
regardless of whether you like that show, and I mean, I was a fan of the show, and I mean, Chandler was my favorite character by far. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, all 6 of those actors were icons. I respect the fact that they did remain really close, because that industry does suffer a lot of egos and jealousies and all of that, and they managed to remain very close throughout and remain really close friends, up until his passing. So I can't imagine how, because they went from obscure actors to a worldwide phenomenon, in the matter of a year. I don't know. I couldn't imagine what that would feel like. And so for them to remain close throughout, I mean, I've got a lot of time for that. And, rest in peace, Matthew Perry, and condolences to his family and everybody who loved him.
Yeah.
This is a really sad episode, because mine's getting here as I put mine up. Like, mine's sad too. Like,
Oh, is it?
not like,
Okay.
yeah, mine's really, really sad.
All right.
Hold on here. Let me get my background up here for people who are not listening on or watching on YouTube. I do put up pictures every time, and so I will have one up here in just one second, because this one is it's a very sad anniversary. Okay, well, that's good enough, I guess. Let's see if that works. There you go.
Oh, yes.
So this is a very sad. Now you can't see the guy on the. Well, there you go. It's a very sad anniversary. It's the 24th anniversary.
Payne Stewart, right? That's Payne Stewart on the left.
That's Payne Stewart.
My left, your right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got. Yeah, it was just. I remember this in 1999. I was a teenager. I remember first. I think it was October the 25th. Payne Stewart and his entourage died in a Learjet crash. Cabin just had a catastrophic depressurization. It killed them all, and the plane just kind of went on this crazy little journey out until it ran out of gas and crashed into a field. And then just a few days later, Greg Moore dies tragically in an IndyCar accident, which was, I mean, I remember I was watching that race live, and I was watching IndyCar a lot at that point, just because you had this guy from Maple Ridge who was just a phenomenon. He was supposed to be the next big thing. He was moving to Penske, which was arguably the biggest racing. Well, I think it was the best racing team in Indy, and he was ready to dominate that circuit. And it was just, I mean, that was just such an awful week, to lose. Payne Stewart, who had just won the U.S. Open a few months before, and then helped lead America to that crazy Ryder Cup win at Brookline in 1999, and to have him die that way at the age of 42, and then Greg Moore at the age of just 24 years old. It was just such an awful week, and I think a lot of us who that remember that time remember that week. It was just awful. And I often look at Greg Moore being that young and wonder what he could have done, because I think he was on the verge of becoming something really special, not just in IndyCar. I think he would have probably gone on to, he was already driving. There's this clip on YouTube of him doing stock car racing against Dale Earnhardt Sr. So he was branching out, and whether it was NASCAR or F1, he was going somewhere. that was an IndyCar. And, I mean, I think most people agree he had an opportunity to be one of the greatest racers ever. And it was, I mean, that track that he died on, they ended up fixing it the next year. And it just,
Yeah.
yeah. And just to be a local guy too, which is, I posted it the other day and I had a lot of local people saying that they weren't racing fans, but it really hit them hard. And I think it hit, a lot of us hard, regardless of whether you were a racing fan or not, because he was a local guy, on the verge of being just a superstar in his sport.
Well, and just how young he was too. Like,
24. Like the crazy
yeah,
thing is he'd be
crazy.
almost 50 now.
Yeah, I
Where
know.
the hell did 24 years go?
No, I couldn't agree with you more. That's a very
It's a
sad,
sad week.
Freeport,
I mean,
segment
God,
we
no, I
had.
think it's just a whole like we bookended it with really sad shit.
Well, let's move on to the outro then. It's been a really fun episode. The first episode, Pete's never been on, so I think we held the fort down pretty good, Brendan. I don't know. I thought we held
Yeah,
it down pretty good.
yeah. Hell with Pete. I think
Uh,
we should. Who's gonna send him the message to say he's cut? You or me on
I'll leave it with you. I'll leave it with you.
it.
But yeah, I mean, look, I think trying to uplift this episode for the ending here. I do think Canuck fans are happy. They're cheering for the team. It's nice to talk about the team. Um, the fact that the fans were so mad after that Rangers game for that missed call on Petey, it was just great to see. It's great to see the fan base slowly come together again. And I know we've said this a couple times on this episode. It's only 9 games in, but it's nice to see.
Enjoy it. Like, hey, it's only 9 games. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. But enjoy yourself. That's what sports are for.
Exactly. You can follow us on Twitter. Be sure to follow at Pete Gas. It's at Pete_gas. You can follow me at Doug Venn. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Canucks Speak.
And me at Jabo, JABO_Vancouver. And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, and there's apparently, according to Doug, multiple buttons that you should be hitting, like notification, subscription, just hit all of them. They're all good. So yes, hit those buttons.
Well, especially since they got rid of the dislike button. So yeah, we don't have to worry about people hitting
Thank you.
that button anymore. It's no longer there.
Cheers, YouTube.
Cheers. Anyways, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.